Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And with this week, we've got the new patch 9.2.5, which did come with a massive sweeping amount of changes to the game, both in PvE and PvP, and I'll have a link to that video at the end of this one. But the purpose of this video is to cover the melee DPS in PvP and rank them based on their competitive viability on the ladder, taking into account, their power, but also their versatility and their flexibility. So which of these specs is more likely to get you a group from looking for group, which is now fortunately going to be cross-faction. Hopefully, it seems like it still may be bugged, as well as today they've reintroduced the conquest boxes, which means if you have an abundance of conquest on a main character, you'll now be able to buy these boxes from a vendor in Oribos to mail to your alts to unlock conquest gear on those alts. So this is likely the best time to come back to Shadowlands if you're looking to gear up for PvP or try something new, or if your spec got hit a little bit hard, or if you just want to mix things up. So that is the purpose of this tier list, is to help you find the best suited melee DPS for you. So let's just get things started. Arms Warrior, this was the top dog of Shadowlands for basically its entirety up until this patch. It now has a specific niche where it is very powerful against melee cleaves with tools like its Die by the Sword, which give it a slight edge over its Fury counterpart in those scenarios. It's honestly very closely balanced with Fury, although Fury does edge a little bit ahead right now in my mind, just because of its self-sustainability and all of the healing that it has available to it. I still do think that Arms is a great spec. I see it most commonly played with Retribution, Paladins, and healers at the moment at the highest parts of the ladder. Are we going to see it in tournament play? Well, we're probably not going to see anything other than Rogue Mage Priest, honestly, in tournament play, but looking at the ladder, you can make this spec work. It's definitely not S tier at the moment because it has its niche, which is just strength against melee DPS, but it has its weakness as well, which is no self-healing or sustainability, which is more noticeable. I do actually like the direction that they took with this spec in bringing it down a few notches. Unfortunately, some other specs still need to be brought down in notches and have their given specific weaknesses. Otherwise, those specs we're gonna have situations like we are seeing in the AWC where things like Outlaw rogues are getting stacked massively. So for me, Arms Warrior is probably coming in at a B, close to an A at the moment, just held a little bit back right now because some of the other specs that do have that healing and self-sustainability, I think you're going to see them a bit more common, and it may be difficult to win people over in groups as they're probably expecting you to be Fury right now in the patch. So it brings it down a few notches if you want to go after it. But I do think if you're like a diehard Arms Warrior fan, you never play Fury type of deal, you can make it work right now. Assassination Rogue, you got some flexibility with this, running Night Fae for Sepsis or Necrolord for sustained damage. You fit into a lot of compositions at the moment, mostly with casters, so things like Shadow Priests and Mages are the most common for this, and you can, of course, fit into the best comp in the game, Rogue Mage Priest. Debatable as to which spec is going to be the best overall, but it is really powerful, fits exactly into the meta. It does have the weakness of being a target at the moment. There are some specs that are just not targets and you are basically invincible. This is not the case with Assassination Rogue, so that does hold it back from me from putting it onto the S tier, but it is most certainly an A tier specialization at the moment. And like I said, you'll have flexibility in comps. Just stick to pairing up with casters at the moment and really try and make sure you have a Night Fae Priest to be reducing the cooldown of your Sepsis if you decide to run the Night Fae Assassination. Enhancement Shaman, this is a spec that got a lot of quality of life changes in 9.2 and now in 9.2.5. It's probably in the same spot. It's a very powerful spec. Did even receive some nerfs to the Venthyr Covenant. Have seen some shamans debating whether or not they want to go Necrolord, but I would personally recommend that you still stay Venthyr as of right now. Chain Harvest still feels fine even with the 15% nerf. Turbo Cleave, unfortunately, is the only composition that I see having a tremendous amount of success. There has been some debate right now with Demonology receiving a 25% Mortal Strike that maybe something like Demonology Enhancement could work as it had in the past, but I'm not sure the burst damage is there for those two specs, and the lack of stun and lack of support between the two of them may not work out synergistically. So Turbo Cleave, you're really pigeonholed, doesn't have a lot of versatility at the moment. You can definitely carry on this spec. It's a great solo spec for running around and just doing battlegrounds or dueling or even trying to carry your friends in twos or something something like that, it can do all of that because of its hybrid nature. Where do we want to put it at the moment? I feel like I can't put it below A because it does see tournament play, and within that specific composition of Turbo, it is an excellent pick, but its versatility to play other comps is likely what it was holding it back from me putting it onto the S tier at the moment. But it's definitely a top of the ladder spec as long as you're running with a Fury Warrior, although you can play with an Arms Warrior, but you'll see casters you'll struggle a bit with. But casters did get nerfed, so Arms Warrior viability may have increased as a result of that, so take that into account. But Fury is still a good pair with it at the moment. Feral Druid, you've got access to one of the best comps in the game right now, which is Hunter Holy Priest, which is the jungle cleave. Definitely would recommend that as the go-to for Feral Druid. You do have some flexibility. I see Feral Druids running with warriors. You can pair up with mages if you're going to run the Convoke the Spirits builds with fire mages, these types of one-shot comps. So you do have a decent amount of flexibility, unlike the Enhancement Shaman, and you have a lot more personal survivability. You're going to be feeling more durable on this. You're also bringing more mobility. And I think Cyclone is honestly stronger than Hex at the moment in terms of crowd control. So for me, do we want to put Feral Druid onto the S tier? I almost think that we need to shift this list down a tier because I do not want to put Feral Druid on the same tier as Outlaw Rogue. I do not think that that is fair or justified. So maybe we slide everything down a notch here just because of how much of a gap everything is. Between Outlaw Rogue and the rest of the game, pretty much. So Feral Druid, I think, is a really good spec. First, versatile, definitely has top tier composition options. You may struggle against the best comps in the game like Rogue Mage, although Jungle might have the best shot actually of any of those. And that's nothing to say that Feral is bad. It's just that those specs within Rogue Mage Priest are just overly dominant at the moment. And if changes come in to direct those powers down, then Feral will likely rise to the top as a result. So I think it is fair to put it up here at the moment. You're very powerful with your set bonuses, your Sickle of your Lion to get your 4-piece as soon as possible if you're going to run Feral Druid. Very important component of doing burst damage with this class at the moment. Frost Death Knight, not seeing a lot of this, particularly seeing more Unholy than Frost. I'm not sure the exact reason. It still brings in the same thing that it always has, which is 2-target cleave or just AoE damage. These melee cleaves, playing with warriors, playing with some rep paladins I've seen every once in a while. It was usually the most powerful when Windwalker Death Knight combined together is powerful because they both synergize so well with Fist of Fury AoE damage, but they're just not. I don't see Windwalker Monk Frost Death Knight really at all. I think that it's kind of falling off a bit, and Unholy is starting to pick up more popularity, but you are still going to run people over with your AoE Abominations limb from the Necrolord Covenant. So if you want something that's going to just bowl people over, that is going to do it. But it does get held back a little bit. I'm debating. I think it might be better than Arms. I feel like it's close. It's close to the point where it's kind of like maybe pushing up onto this next tier. I do want some delineation between these because I think there is at the moment. I'm really hard pressed to not put it here, but it's just I don't see it a lot anymore. It seems like Unholy has taken favor in terms of popularity, so putting it that high might run the risk of leading you astray, and I don't want to do that in patch 9.2.5, but I think it is still a solid spec. We see this as C tier right now, but this is mostly just because of the difference between this. There is a very small amount of difference between C to B, and then a little bit bigger from B to A. And then for Fury Warrior, this is, again, a spec that is going to synergize with more classes. I think if Outlaw Rogue wasn't so dominant, you may see it more with mages or warlocks as well. But specifically Rets and Enhancement Shamans seem to be the go-to for Fury Warrior. I think putting it probably slightly ahead of Enhance because of its versatility to play more comps. So if you're worried about finding groups in LFG, Fury is going to be a better pick than Enhance. But your ability to interact with your teammates and support them with healing is going to be lower. You're a great self-sustained unit, but it's going to be lower. And I should say that this is for 3v3. I'm talking specifically with a little bit of kind of 1v1 and 2v2 and these other things you can expect, but this ranking is mostly supposed to be about 3 versus 3 right now. So the next one is going to be Havoc Demon Hunter. This is another spec that's doing a tremendous amount of damage right now. Has a lot of different comps now that it has Mortal Strike. I've seen it played with Affliction Warlocks. I'm playing it right now with the Balanced Druid. You can run it with melee classes like Demon Hunter Death Knight, this type of deal. And it's really quite powerful. Oh, almost choked a little bit. Maybe I didn't press the pre-blur on the Rogue Mage Go, so we lost, but on that cough. But Demon Hunter is really good right now with such a low cooldown blur and how much less damage it takes to magic damage. We don't really see it again in tournament play all that often, because again, Rogue Mage is such a troublesome thorn in its side. I think that it is more versatile than Enhancement Shaman right now in terms of comps options. So if you want something that's flexible, a lot of people are still running the Necro Lord, but I have seen some experimentation with other covenants if you wanted to try them, like Night Fae for the Hunt or Venthyr for the Sinful Brand. Why am I choking so much? Okay. We've cleared, I think hopefully we've cleared that up. Oh, and then finally, we've got to the creme de la creme, the best spec in the game right now that you can stack, and it doesn't matter. You could probably run 3 of this thing if you really wanted to, and that is the Outlaw Rogue. And this was one that I had a hard time in the past giving a high ranking because most people had not been willing to dedicate themselves enough to it to figure out if it was going to be strong or not. But this spec is just unbelievable at the moment. It is just invincible. It's like you're using cheat codes if you pick this spec, and then if you pair it with a Fire Mage and a Holy Priest, yeah, you're going to be dominant with that. It does have flexibility. I've been seeing people playing it with lots of different melee DPS, just because it's basically not a target for any team, brings some of the best crowd control, if not the best crowd control in the game, and is just invincible. There are some cheeky honor talents where you can use your Crimson Vial and it'll heal an ally as well as you, so you can kind of sustain yourself almost like a hybrid in those cases when running that, but it's mostly the Enduring Brawler at the moment, providing it such a massive increase of stamina that its hit points are just far too high, with all of its cooldown synergies with Float Like a Butterfly, reducing its invasion, but more importantly its feint, which is meaning it's just taking like 30% less damage the entire game every game, while it has 100,000 hit points. I don't know how it only got a little bit of a flick on the knee in this most recent round of changes, whereas Destruction Warlock got a more suitable amount applied to it. So I'm not sure if they're just worried about nerfing it, because Outlaw is almost never this good, but this isn't the case of you want to buff things to Outlaw Rogue. I don't think you ever want specs in a place where they just can't be a target. Like you join the game and know, well, we're never targeting that one because it can't die. I feel like that is not where a class needs to be in terms of balance, and should not have other classes buffed to that point. The changes they made to like Balance Druid to bring down their invincible bear form situations and Arms Warriors D-stance, I think was a much more suitable way of creating strengths and weaknesses and more intensity in the gameplay, because ultimately in Arena, I think every single player should be worried about being a target at some point, but Outlaw Rogue can be seemingly unaware of where they are in the game and still get away with it and pull off some wins with ridiculously low crowd control options. So definitely the number one spec at the moment, pretty much for the whole game in PvP. You're gonna have a good time with this, whether it's 2v2, 1v1, 3v3, whatever it is, and you're gonna be desirable just because of the popularity and the strengths of that. It's very forgiving. Ret Paladin actually, I think, went up on stocks with 9.2.5. Its main problem was Destrolock Frostmage, and both those specs got appropriately tuned down from where they were. Warlocks are now, I see shifting towards Demonology, but speaking more specifically about Ret, with that weakness being brought down, they're kind of the kings of the cleaves at the moment, with how much burst damage they have available to them. So Ret Paladin really went up with this patch. I've seen it only really with melee cleave, although you can experiment with casters, but I would recommend sticking to kind of warriors at the moment for Ret. So maybe its versatility again is going to hold it back slightly for me, but still here, kind of middle of the pack, maybe slightly better than Demon Hunter. It's pretty tight. The other main reason that Ret Paladin is better is because Resto Shaman is better. With the buffs that they got, and Rets are great at killing them. So if there's more Resto Shamans in your Ret, that's more free Shamans to destroy. So it's going to be really good here in this patch. And again, the differences between this is very small, whereas this is like massive. Don't take this into too much of an account as C being like a terrible tier or something. I think these are competitive options on the tier list. D would be like, just don't bother. Subtlety Rogue, this is the only spec in the game that I've seen able to kill an Outlaw Rogue. So if you can kill the spec that is invincible, there's probably a lot of viability in the options of picking this. So for me, actually, Subtlety is pretty neck and neck with Outlaw Rogue. It's behind it on the list, which is why it's coming to the right on this tier list, and that's because it's not absolutely invincible. But if you really want to make yourself invincible, you can be really sneaky and get away from a lot of encounters, make it difficult for your opponents. But your versatility for comp options is a little bit less flexible. Pretty much only mages and maybe marksmanship hunters, these kind of big bursty classes, so you stun the target while big burst comes in. That's going to be where you're going to want to be focusing your niche if you decide to pick subtlety. But its damage is just so high at the moment, and with Rogue Mage Priest being such a dominant comp, it feels strange to not put it onto the S tier alongside Outlaw at the moment. It's really good to be a rogue in this patch, to say the least. Survival Hunter, this is a spec again where you're pretty much stuck with jungle, but it is a great comp. Beast Mastery is going to be tough, kind of shifting between what hunter spec is the best for jungle at the moment. But because you're kind of so limited in your comp options, I've seen a little bit of Shadow Priest Survival. You do a lot of damage on the scoreboard, like you're going to pump meters, but you might not be the most desirable outside of those specific comps. You might struggle to find groups as a result. So feel a little bit more comfortable holding that spec back a little bit on the overall tier list, mostly just because of its versatility. It has some, not none. Otherwise, I would put it probably down here onto the C tier if it really only had like one niche and one option. But I think it's got a little bit more than that. But it does a lot of damage. It's super fun right now with the Wildfire Bomb build. Would definitely recommend it. And then here we go. We've got Unholy Death Knight. This is one where I'm seeing played mostly with warriors. A little bit of Ret Paladin, not a lot. Mostly Demon Hunters, mostly Warriors, double melee with Resto Shaman. That comp got a lot better on this patch. Don't think it's better than Outlaw. Think it's going to be tough to be able to beat those types of compositions just with how durable they are. You're just not able to attack into permanent evasion on a 100k HP target. It's just going to be really tough. But you are great at just running targets down with your Abominations limb. And due to its kind of increased in popularity, I think it's slightly better than Frost at the moment. Probably about right there for Death Knight. Some of the problems with Death Knight is kind of getting run over by the warriors. Like Fury Warrior will run you over. Rogue Mage will be really difficult to kind of play around, but maybe better in this patch again with the Resto Shaman buffs. So we'll have to kind of wait and see how it goes here for Unholy Death Knight. And all the double casters that you were strong into are a little bit less powerful, so your niche is kind of falling off. But you can see that the melee DPS are pretty close to each other overall. And then finally, we've got Windwalker Monk, which was owning for a large part of the earlier parts of Shadowlands. The Arms Warrior took the stage, and now it's Outlaw Rogue has taken the stage. And I think if the invincibility of Outlaw Rogue was toned down, you'd see more Windwalkers coming back into the mix. But I see a little bit of Arcane Windwalker starting to pop up again because Arcane got some buffs, which has been a kind of a staple comp for Windwalker, was Mage Windwalker. But same with Death Knight Windwalker, but as you can see, Death Knight's a little bit behind, so it's not there, but it brings insanely high burst damage. Like you can still completely KO somebody that's still in the game. Problem is when you fight an Outlaw Rogue, then you can't do that, and they're completely shutting down most of your crowd control. But I think it's going to be in a little bit of a better spot, and if changes come through, I think that it could be really powerful. But right now, I'd say it's about all on the same tier, going kind of left to right in terms of which one is better. So we've got Outlaw as the number one melee DPS spec. You can't really go wrong with it. It's bulletproof. Subtlety is the second. Feral Druid, Assassination, Fury, Demon Hunter, Survival Hunter, Ret Paladin, Enhance, Unholy, Windwalker, Frost, and Arms. And it is very close, honestly, to all of these being on the same level with their own specific kits, strengths, and weaknesses. So hopefully we see another round of changes come through the same way that they have been to get it to that point, because ultimately that is going to be the best game, where every spec has its kind of own little niche and strength and weakness, where all classes are a target, so there's some level of intensity in each match. You don't go, oh, we can't look at that target and attack that because it's not going to die, and then players start stacking those invincible classes and games go deep into dampening. That is where the problems start to happen. So hopefully the specs that are now at the top because of that powerful defense will be brought down a little bit, and it's going to be an insane game to be a melee DPS at the moment. Almost all the specs are pumping massive numbers. You're not going to go really wrong with anything at the moment. Just your flexibility and options and comps is going to be a little bit, and maybe your popularity in LFG might hold back some of your potential right now. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will catch you in the next one.